Welcome to the Gaze Insights platform. My name is Angela, your host on Inheritance Conversations. Today, we're going to look at what happens when a dad, a patriarch, passes on and how families fall apart. And this has become such a global challenge with families going separate ways. And the family unit is the beginning of everything. So when it breaks apart, it creates a nightmare for community. So what really happens? We all know what happens in the beginning. The funeral brings unity, people hug, they cry, they remember stories. For a moment, everybody feels like family again. Then comes the burial. There are rituals, cultural expectations, public displays of respect. Roles are clear, emotions are shared. But after the visitors leave, after the tents come down, after the food stops, there's a question no one wants to ask. Who gets what? And that's where the atmosphere shifts. There are some common triggers you can come across, and we need to look at these in context. You're going to start hearing verbal promises. Dad told me this land was mine. Dad gave me this land on my birthday. I had a private discussion with Dad and he agreed to give me ABCD. These verbal promises start appearing and creating the foundation for conflict. Another trigger will be hidden documents where someone says, Dad told me this land was mine, or Dad gave me this land but did not put it in writing. And this brings distrust, as the person who makes the claim is now looked at as a greedy sibling. We also have triggers coming from the favored child, the one everyone believes was always chosen, the child who feels that they're entitled to more. When you start seeing these, and there's often one in every family, they take the mantle and think that they were the only person whom the parent really cared about. And they distance themselves from the rest of the family. Because at this point, they're using their assumed favor to outwit everyone so that they can get a larger portion. We also have the child who stayed home versus the one who left. When we have this situation, the ones who stay home have a level of resentment that they've not gone out and done what their calling is. And they look at the ones who left as not belonging or not needing to partake in the sharing or distribution of assets. This brings us sacrifice versus success tension. We also have blended families where step siblings or outside children now take the center stage and suddenly claim recognition. At this point, there's resentment that they're not part of the formally recognized official family, or that the circumstances of their being step is being brought to question, being brought to the light, and it brings out their inner wounding. We also have triggers that will come from business involvement. One sibling, for example, may have run the business and others didn't. That sibling has put in effort and time and money as well. And a lot of the business may have grown from their thought process and skill. The others are resentful of the one-on-one connection they had with the parent. So at this point, conflict is likely to arise. But inheritance fights are rarely about money. They're about identity, fairness, unresolved childhood wounds. And this creates fights over land, the assets, any form of property, heirlooms, and so on. So what brings siblings to this point? Why do they stop speaking? People do not stop speaking overnight. They stop speaking because something deeper was triggered. This resentment must have been there for a very long time. And it only comes to the surface when the patriarch dies, where people become emotional and now have no referee to help them to solve some of these problems. So one of the reasons is unwritten expectations. There's so much drama when a parent dies. They'll begin by saying, Dad told me privately, making their private conversations become public disputes. And without written clarity, memory becomes the evidence they're using. But others will look at them as con men or con women at this point, because those private conversations were not shared. You'll also find siblings stop speaking to each other because they had different relationships with the father. Each child experienced a different father. The oldest felt responsible for their dad. The younger one felt protected. The daughter may have felt overlooked. The son may have felt entitled. Inheritance activates these identities again. It's no longer about land at this point, it's about who mattered. It's a competition, and they're competing to seek favor from someone who's gone. So they have to then seek it among those who also mattered. Another reason why siblings stop speaking is because there was silence before death. There were no family meetings, there was no clarity, there was no structured leadership. When a patriarch dies, authority dissolves instantly, and the siblings are going to scramble to fill that vacuum. And silence creates a power struggle. As a parent, don't assume that your children are so close and love each other to that extent where they're not holding grudges. Because if you stay silent, you're going to bring a battle that you won't be there to referee. Another reason siblings stop speaking is because of pressure from outsiders, especially from spouses, from in-laws, from your church community, from lawyers, extended family. Sometimes the sibling is not fighting, they are being advised. And they will be advised by other external parties that also have an interest in the inheritance that has come in, especially if it's a big one. And fear spreads quickly when money is involved. When you have fear, grief, and money all in one pot, it leads to an emotional explosion. Grief removes filters. Money adds fire. Because with grief, people don't care anymore. So when there's now a stake, which is the money, these filters go away, and people grieving are not operating rationally. They are operating from fear of loss, insecurity, and also fear of being sidelined. So you need to ask yourself, is our family at this point, and what could have prevented it? You need to shift into solution mode. This kind of conflict is preventable. So don't be preachy. Don't read people the law. Be calm as you try to help them. This kind of conflict can be prevented, not perfectly, but structurally. And three things change everything. As you live today, we all expect to die at one point or another. Please have structured family conversations before your death. Not casual talks, not facilitated, unfacilitated chats at a breakfast table, but facilitated intentional conversations where expectations are clarified publicly and not whispered. When you whisper privately, you create cliques, you create silos, and you start bringing vengeance into the picture. Also, set up clear documentation and align it with the law. If you assume that your culture supersedes the law, you're wrong. Cultural assumptions are not legal protection. Your documents must reflect intention, they must align with the law, and you must communicate them clearly. Because secrecy breeds suspicion. Do you have a governance structure for your business if you're running a family business or your own business? Do you have a governance structure for your land? Because if you have land, an ancestral home, or a family business, you must have structure. It must have defined roles, who does what. It must have defined rights, who gets what. If a family member has injected personal cash, time, and effort, state it, reward it. If a family member or one child has helped to invest, state it so that those are defined. Then also define the decision-making authority. Who looks after your estate and executes it? Who's your heir? Who determines what goes where? Who takes leadership? Because a family without leadership will crumble. Love is not a succession plan, and silence is not protection. And fairness must be structured, not assumed. But we fear to write our will because we assume we are knocking at fate's door. And yet that's not true. You must have fairness in the way you structure your legacy. Don't assume it. Now, if you're in a situation where it has already happened, you're wounded as siblings, you've stopped speaking to each other, all is not lost. But you must handle it carefully. Because at the end of the day, you'll still be siblings. You may not be talking or sharing siblings, but blood will still be blood. What will happen is that you'll go your separate ways and life will go on, but the family legacy will end with the family unit that's broken. So if you're in it already, pause legal aggression if possible. Litigation hardens positions, but there are cases where litigation is required, especially when some family members are not going to listen to the voice of reason. Then separate ownership from emotion. The law is clear about dealing with facts first. Feelings always come next, but you must heal the emotional side also. With time, it is impossible to heal the emotional gap. You need to bring in structured mediation, and that means an independent, objective person, not a casual conversation among yourselves around a dinner table, because everyone has interests. Rebuild clarity before you agree. That means discuss things openly, do not hide anything. Clarity reduces fear. Fear fuels conflict. And sometimes families don't need another lawyer, another church person, or another counselor to give them ideas. What you need is structured conversation. Let it feel like wisdom, not marketing. So you dealing with this right now, and I really feel your pain. If you haven't written your will, that's something you should start working on. Your children will not fight because you died. They'll fight because you left them questions instead of clarity. And if you're still ready to have a legacy, you're living at the moment, lead. Be the leader your family requires. If conflict has started, structure it, but do not ignore it. I'd like to thank you for listening to this session. We're definitely going to go through so many aspects of inheritance and on this series. So like, share, and subscribe so that you can get a notification when the next one is incoming. I hope you have picked a nugget or two if it resonates. And if it doesn't, I'm sure one of the others will give you some level of comfort that you are not going through this alone. Once again, my name is Angela. I'm your host, and I'm very excited to continue discussing this topic that has pervaded our globe, and it has not left families unscathed. It has damaged family units. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to sharing with you once again. Have a pleasant day.